here, right? And now we're recording, and it'll have, the rest of our conversation. And I'll just edit it. I'll edit the little parts down here.
Do you do that on Zoom?
The editing?
Yeah.
No,
or no, I should say, do you record to the cloud, or do you record to your own computer?
Right now it goes to my own computer, but that's because I don't know how to record it to the cloud.
Well, the difference is, I think if you record to the cloud, I don't know if you can edit it. I do a lot of meetings, and sometimes you wonder, if I'm recording meetings, sometimes somebody will say something outrageous.
Right.
And you want to kind of get rid of it.
I don't want, right.
And if it's recorded in the cloud, it once you send it out, it's there.
It's there.
I'm not so sure if I can edit it.
I gotcha. No, with this, I don't know what it's like. I'll have to run some experiments. But when I stop the meeting, it gives me a file on my computer, and then what I then do is I put it in the podcast software, which is really simple, and then the podcast software lets me break it down, right?
Yeah, now maybe that's a little different.
Yeah.
With the Zoom meeting thing, yeah.
Yeah, but
which is good, because then you can shorten it or do whatever you need to do.
If there's a pause or whatever. For the most part, I mean, you'll see how it goes. It's just a conversation. I don't really have to edit too much in it, right? There have been times where I've dropped a call and I've had to splice things together.
Right.
But for the most part, it's a pretty smooth, once I just chop, with this example, I'll chop off the beginning part, and then I'll stop recording. So I want to do it at the end, but it's a simple.
Yeah, I was just wondering how it worked.
Yeah, no, of course. So what I'll do is I'll do a separate introduction so we can get right into it.
Okay.
And I'll just kind of say, welcome, Coach Fuss. Thanks for being here. Am I saying that right? It's Fuss, right?
Fussner.
Fussner. Okay.
But Fuss is good.
Fuss. Okay. I was calling you Fuss for the longest time. It's Fuss.
And Amanda probably never corrected you.
No, she calls you Fuss. I know.
No, they all do. They all,
right.
Yeah,
Coach Fuss.
That's why nobody knows there's an NER on the bottom.
Right. Right. I love it. Yeah, you're in my contact. You're everywhere as Fuss.
Yeah, that's how they all are.
Yeah. Beautiful. All right, so I'll just briefly introduce you, and then we'll get right into it. Okay. The questions, if you hear me typing, right, that's just me typing your answers up.
Okay.
If the questions are there more to guide us. If there's something I want you to talk more about, I'll just dive right into that. But if you hear me typing, that's just me on my end. All righty. So I'm really excited to have you on. Thank you for being here, Coach Fussner. How are you?
I'm good. I appreciate the opportunity. Always fun to talk basketball.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Coach, you are recently retired, but I like to start every episode with, why do you coach, or why did you coach in your case?
Well, since I've had such a long career out of it, I actually started coaching at the CYO level with junior high school kids. And I was just at the end of college, getting done college. And I really, I happened to be involved with a couple of very good basketball people. And the coaching part of it just really intrigued and interested me. And then back in those days, sometime if you wanted to get a job, there was coaching maybe attached to it. So it's exactly what happened to me. I was very happy. I was coaching at a junior high school. It was a Catholic school. And I was teaching at a public school in Atlantic City. And the principal tapped me on the shoulder one day and said, I know you're interested in coaching basketball one day, and I know you probably would prefer boys. Now, that's my second year there. And back in those days, you had to teach 3 years in one day to get tenure.
Okay. And
you can almost kind of tell when you're being given an offer that you can't refuse. He said that I need a girls coach. And this is like 74, 75.
Right.
And if you go back, and I'm aging myself now, but I'm talking about it was probably within 2 years of girls basketball being 6 players
Oh
and
boy.
not being allowed to cross half court. You
Sure.
had the rover.
Sure.
Okay. So some of the girls that I had coached, that was their introduction to basketball at the junior high school and then maybe as a freshman. It
Okay.
then changed over to 5-on-5 the way it is now.
Right.
So when I was coaching, I never did the 6-man. I wouldn't even be able to. It just intrigued me when I started reading and learning and studying the history of the game. That I was that close to starting my coaching career when that just went out of existence.
Sure.
So I obviously said yes, I'd like to coach, and I look forward to the opportunity. And man, I fell in love with it from that day on. I had a bunch of girls that were unbelievable. They were, when you talk about dedicated, they were extremely happy to have someone coaching them. We were very competitive. And within a year, we were right at the top of the conference and really going at it hard. There was no tournament of champions at the time. It was almost all the groups played together.
Mm-hmm.
So the competition was amazing. And from there, I kind of stayed on the female side of it. And that's how I ended up at Stockton. I had an opportunity. People asked me if the Stockton job opened almost the same way. They were looking to move on from more or less of a JV type. If you might not believe this now, but back then there was so much interest in basketball and so many girls playing it. They had JV teams at the Division III level.
College level, yeah.
Yep. A few today still do it, or they might just play their second half of their varsity kids and give them a chance to play.
Yeah.
But that's how I got into the college game. I took that opportunity. And so I coached there, and then I went back to coaching boys in Atlantic City High School till the mid-'90s, and then Stockton was going to go full-time. And I said, well, I could take advantage of, that would be a great opportunity. So I went back to Stockton, and it was full-time. Okay. And then I retired 2 years ago. So
that was what, 97? 96?
Yes. Yeah, 96, 97, I think it was, yes.
Wow, okay.
Yep. I went back part-time for maybe 2 years because I knew it was going to become a full-time job. And then they made it full-time. At that point, the whole NJAC was full-time.
Right.
And 25 years after that, I decided to retire. Enough was enough. And I had, when you've reached that point where you don't look forward to the next year. Yeah. And that's kind of when you realize that, okay, it's time to maybe step back and so, yeah, of course you miss it, but that is how I really got involved in coaching. And I feel great that I had the opportunity to coach at both females and males. Right. I get that question a lot. What's the difference?
You want to answer it again?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a legitimate question. Without offending either group, girls are not any easier to coach or women on the college level. They're very, very competitive, and there's no difference between the competitiveness of a male or a female athlete. I think the biggest difference in our sport, basketball, to put it bluntly, the boys' game can be played over the rim.
Right.
And the women's game is just starting to get played that way. And in most instances, it's not. Mm-hmm. So you really have to rely on your half-court game, running your sets. Mm-hmm. So I think the female end of it, they're a little bit more disciplined.
Sure.
and they have to rely on that phase of the game versus where guys just want to get up and down the floor and dunk, and
Yep.
it's hard to get that out of them. So from a competitive standpoint, I never saw any difference.
Sure.
Emotionally, yeah, there is a little bit of a difference sometimes. Girls can do. One thing I always worried about with the team is, and you probably realize this as a player, if a couple girls weren't getting along, it can really go through the team.
Mm-hmm.
Because they tend not to maybe deal with that as best as they should, where guys, they would either fight over it or in some way, shape, or form, it would be over the next day.
Yep.
And on the other end, a girl, it could be as early as why did you take the cereal that I was going to eat last night? And it ends up being a team issue. So,
yep.
So you know that's something that you just have to have an understanding and a little bit of patience with.
Yep. I lived with 7 of my teammates my senior year.
Oh wow,
And we told my coach, and he was horrified, and he was like, "One of you is going to leave a spoon in the sink or something, and it's going to tear apart the whole team."
Well, he's right.
And he was, and we were the right group of people to not let that happen or let it become a thing. But any other team, it would have been a high risk.
Well, you know, things transition too as you go. When I first got involved in college, we weren't allowed to have what you would call athletic dorms.
Okay.
Roommates were random. Then as it progressed, kids would meet each other through AAU. They knew they were both going to the same school. And I think it became a comfort level with them. Can we room together? Mm-hmm. And at first, I'll be honest with you, I was very reluctant because of some of those things.
Yeah.
Now, my last few years at Stockton, juniors and seniors living on campus was rare.
Yep.
Even though we have dorm space, they ended up renting a home somewhere. And like you just said, it might be half the team in the house.
Yep.
Or half the softball team and the other half is the basketball team. And it really just kind of went away. I never really had any issues with it. And the greatest part is I never really had any issues with them getting involved in any kind of, let's say, outside social issues.
Sure.
Where sometime on campus it became a bigger issue.
Right, a problem.
Stockton is an open campus, so alcohol and all that was allowed. But when you're mixing that 21-year-olders with 18-year-olders,
right,
there can be issues. But
you get in trouble.
Now it's like you they're going to room together and they get along and they work things out.
Yeah.
So I think that's improved a lot. I think that that's a phase of the game that, as a coach, you worry about because team chemistry is very important.
Sure.
And little things like that can, like a spoon in the sink, can tip it over.
Yeah, for sure. Can you speak a little bit to that? Is there a team that sticks out in your mind that had either really great chemistry or really not so great chemistry? And what, if anything, did you do to create that kind of environment?
Well, I think if I can go back to like just naming someone, when Amanda played for me, it was early on, and we're talking about dorm situations, and she was from North Jersey coming south, so living in the dorms was normal at that time and almost a necessity because off-campus housing was not, in our area, wasn't as prevalent. So those kind of teams back then, they had a little bit of a different bond. They would get together and have spaghetti at one person's dorm room one night and, a lot of pregame stuff. And as it got to where they went off campus, that was always the case. They would be having the the freshmen come over who were basically on campus.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to say which group I think bonded better together. I think the later teams do, because they are closer knit together, where the social media, just the way they interact with their phone and with Twitter and all the different social media outlets, they really know each other.
Yeah.
And they know their opponents, because that's the same way. It goes two ways. Has that caused some issues? Yeah, it can. Because if you put the wrong thing up or you post the wrong thing,
Right.
where back in Amanda's era, that didn't happen.
Right.
It was more or less, well, what did you say? And they would talk it out.
Yeah.
The one difference I think between maybe the players in the 80s, 90s to now, captains were more responsible then. Kids today don't seem to want to take on the responsibility of being a captain. I don't know if it's peer pressure. And coaches, I think, always look to have the captain be their ear in the locker room. And I think today that's become tougher. It's become, as a coach, it's tougher. And I even think it's probably on a high school level the same way. For whatever the reason, it's rare. Like we were talking about earlier, it's rare to get that self-motivated kid that's going to pick the ball up and go out there on a 95-degree day and work out on the blacktop.
Yeah.
It's the same as trying to get a player now to take leadership. But the teams that maybe are better teams had that ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
They had the leadership. You have to have it.
Yeah.
But they're reluctant. I find them to be reluctant to do it. And even having a close relationship with our men's program, it's the same way. The men are the same way. They don't want to take responsibility. They take their own, but they don't want to, they don't want to have to question someone else without you getting involved as a coach.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I think the players today are very sensitive. A lot of people might call it the helicopter generation. Their parents don't want to let them go.
Yeah.
They become tough to coach sometimes because of that. But if you have that leader in the room that's able to step up and tell them, look, coach is only doing this for your own good. Don't take it personal, those kinds of things. You have a better team, where you got to build that today. They're not just, leaders are not just stepping up and falling out of the sky.
Yeah.
Now you've been more, I don't know if you find that, I would say, because of my experience at the college level, it's got to be almost the same on the high school level, if not worse.
Yeah, I mean, what I found is kids want the title, maybe, but not the responsibility.
Yes, not the responsibility.
And what I have found is often we rely on, okay, we wait till their senior year and then we call them captains and we expect them to lead. But if we haven't taught them how to lead, then how do we flick that switch on senior year and go, okay, you're leaders now, if we haven't guided them through that process? So I'm curious to your answer of like, well, how do we build a leader? Where does that start?
Well, one of the things that we started to really do is talk about it and get, their idea of a leader. I mean, I kind of stressed with it as a coach, because I think the other thing you got to look at too, I was a male.
Sure.
Coaching, being the head coach of female sport. And sometimes you don't want your personality to to get in the way of things. I mean, I could be demanding.
Sure.
And you want that captain who's, like you just said, maybe that junior or senior who's seen it, been through it, and realizes, well, coach's motivation is really this. So you kind of got to really talk about that with not only the person you're going to select as a captain. I've had captains who were not necessarily starters or not necessarily the best, anywhere near the best player on the team, but were the best leaders. And I found that the better players would scratch their head and look at them and say, well, I'm playing more than you. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. But yet you have the respect of the coaches and you have the respect of the players. They become better leaders.
Yeah.
Sometimes the better players can get very self-centered. They have a bad game. They want to get wrapped up in that. Where a player who steps up and say, hey, look, don't you think I would like to be out there? And this is what I'm watching, and this is what I see on the bench. So they really become, you kind of want that person to be the third arm of the coaching staff.
Yeah.
Coaches don't really today want to get involved in those type of squabbles. And, you know, not that you just want to be total X's and O's, but you want to be able to teach them more about what life is like versus just playing. And I think following orders and being a leader are all part of that process.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes hard.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been very, very frustrated as a team and a coach where we've had really good teams and no leadership, and things start to fall apart. And then you got to somehow, you step in a room and say, look, I don't want to have to do this. I'm your coach, but now I'm going to have to also be your captain. This is what should be being said.
Amongst yourselves, but none of you. Yeah.
I wanted them to hold themselves accountable.
Sure.
And sometimes that's hard to teach, to get that point across. And and just to repeat it, sometimes that secondary player who just had leadership abilities was the person able to get them together and make the proper corrections.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you don't like what somebody's saying about you or is saying to you, but if you respect that person, you'll be more apt to accept it and then do something about it. That's the other.
Right. How would a player, so if there was a player listening right now who wanted to start to earn the respect of their teammates and their coaches, what would that look like?
I think that you know, that's a key area and a key component to trying to get a captain. That person should be someone that the coaching staff respects. And not just the coaching staff, but I would think that on the college level, maybe even have a rapport with other parts of the college, whether it be residence hall, you know, experience, good life experiences.
Yep.
Because you want them to have that. You want them to, we were big on having our team do things in the community. And I wanted them to experience it. One of the biggest things we did was we took kids to, it was called Field of Dreams, and it's a baseball program for handicapped kids.
Oh, cool.
And I'm talking about kids that were on gurneys, wheelchairs. You know, you worked with them probably.
Yep.
Crutches.
Yep.
Just kids that
ventilators.
Need that. And we did a lot of things like that. And someone would be afraid to go or they wouldn't want to go. And that's where your leadership says, look, we do this every year. You're going to get there and you're going to love it.
Yeah.
And then we might do things like we've gone to the Ronald McDonald House and cook breakfast. So you want, and that's where a leader has to come in. That has to be sold to the team. And yeah, it's a bonding thing, but it's also giving back.
Yeah.
A little bit. And I kind of wanted them to give back in an area that, they might have felt comfortable. We did a lot of clinics, free clinics in the community. So that person that can accept that, that's one component. And then there's the daily routine of practice when the team isn't hustling.
Yep.
That person's got to be able to step up, say, Coach, can we have a minute? Get them together and say, hey, look, I know what they're thinking over there, and they're the coaches, but I'm telling you now, we're not putting the effort into that.
Mm-hmm.
And the other phase of the team, they got to step up and say, okay, you're right.
Yep.
And then you get into the game, what happens in a game during the course of the game. Attitudes, body language, paying attention to the game plan.
Mm-hmm.
That leader has to be able to assist you in saying, hey, wait a minute, Coach went over all this stuff on the scouting report, and we're not paying one bit of attention to what is really going on.
Yep.
And the biggest thing today probably then is the social aspect. What goes on after games and on weekends when we're not around. That's where things need to be policed, because kids can do stupid things at any level.
Yep.
And you really need that kind of adult in the room.
Yep.
Which I would call our captains or leaders.
Yep.
To be able to draw attention to that and help out there. And then I think the other thing most important too is they can have the captain should be able to, a player should feel comfortable going to the captain.
Yep.
And saying, I don't understand, coach is always on me. Can you help me out with that?
Yeah.
And then you get that open book relationship between that player, the captain, and your coaches.
Yep.
If you can somehow throw that all together, I think you got a pretty good chance of having a pretty good bond with your team.
Right.
And those kinds of, because those issues can be very serious.
Yep.
To a team.
Yep.
You see it all the time. A player gets arrested for doing something, or somebody. Right now, one of the biggest things going around is the social injustices and people making comments that are misunderstood or shouldn't be said.
Yep.
And they have to be all kept in line. So it's not easy, but I think there are things that definitely coaches look for when they're looking for somebody to be named a captain, not just to go out there and talk to the referees and shake hands before the game.
Yeah. No,
that's only part of it.
Yeah. Right. And that's a fraction, right? That's the tail end of it. You just gave a great summary of. Thank you.
And in the game, when they are in the game, by rule, the captain is the only person that can really address a referee.
Right.
And I've had very, very good players who probably should have been captains, but I knew they could not control themselves at certain situations. And that would be the last person I want talking to the officials.
Yeah.
I'm bad enough talking to them. I need somebody that can smooth them over.
Right.
One of my best captains right now is an assistant district attorney in Camden County. And when I would go off a little bit, she would make a point that the referee was near me and she was near me. And she would say, look, give us a chance here. Halftime, he's going to be all right. We're going to give him his meds at halftime, and he'll be fine. And she would say, and then the referee would laugh, and it would change the whole demeanor of the conversation, and I'd have to laugh.
Yep.
And I respect. I never got in one time would I ever really get upset with her for saying that, because it just broke the ice. It changed the whole. And she would do it all the time.
Yeah.
So we'll be all right. We're going to get him his meds.
I love that.
And she felt comfortable being able to say that.
Right. Yeah.
She's probably right now, Amanda might have been right before her. This girl loved Halloween, and she missed practice her junior and senior year on Halloween, and I knew why. To this day, and she's got kids, I send her a happy Halloween text with somebody in a costume. I said, I know you're dressed up tonight, Rose.
Oh,
So,
brother. That's funny. It sounds like she had quite the sense of humor.
she did.
But that's great, right? And it sounds like you struck the right balance there of
Yeah, and I think sometimes that's hard you don't always get them like that.
no.
No. There's been captains where if I'm doing that, instead of the captain saying, we're going to get him his meds, they would turn around and say, well, he's right.
Right,
Bark
right back, yeah.
And then it doesn't help.
Yeah.
Doesn't help at all.
No. Yeah, absolutely. It helps to have the perspective of somebody else and somebody you trust.
Right? Yeah, because when it's game time, they're the spokesperson.
Right.
For the team.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
And unfortunately, even if I always wanted to have more than one captain too. I've had 3. I've had tri-captains. If I know 3 people get along with one another and they all might bring something different to the table.
Right.
Like, I'll give you an example. Leah and Sasha were 2 different. They were peas in a pod. One was 6'4" and the other was 5'4". But Leah would never say a word. She was a very, very quiet person. However, when she spoke, she was just about every time right. And every coach in the room and every player in the room would listen to her.
Yeah.
Where the other one would go off all the time.
Right.
But they would get together. And then I had a third one who was in the middle between the 2 of them. Mm-hmm. And it ended up working out very well. So sometimes it's not just one person. You got to get that mix.
Yeah, right. You need all the spices.
And I don't think any one person wants to take on all that responsibility either.
Right.
I mean, I even noticed a lot of times in high school now there's more than one captain.
Yeah.
Even though one of them can be the spokesperson, but
sure.
That's an important phase of a team and the game.
Yeah.
Summer workouts, having that captain be the leader. The old, I can say it now because I'm not coaching, but the old captain's practices were important.
Sure.
I mean, I had captains that our whole offense was in.
Right.
By October 15th.
Yeah, because your kids knew what they were doing.
Just in open gyms, they would say, no, before we play, you're going to learn this.
Yeah. No, it's
or making sure they get to the weight room.
Yeah.
Conditioning. There's things that coaches sometimes can't do and shouldn't have to get involved in.
Right.
So.
I'm just thinking of a couple of our kids, right, that I have now or have had in the past, and like it's really hard to first of all, hold yourself accountable, and then hold somebody else accountable. So like, could you maybe give an example of a time either you held a player accountable or another player held somebody else accountable, and like how do you get over that? What helps you get over that difficulty of doing that?
One of the things that I always tried to do is I would hold a preseason individual meeting with every player, a mid-season meeting, and then maybe go over and say, now look, back in September, you said you were going to do this. It's now January, and you haven't come close to doing that. And you give them a chance. Is there a reason for it? Is your ankle hurting you? Is schoolwork getting you down? Is there a problem at home? And then obviously you do the post game. I started doing that also with the captains. Mm-hmm. I would hold captains meetings, not all the time, because you can actually out meeting yourself. You can do a little bit too much.
Right.
But we would set parameters, not just goals and objectives, but we would set certain things that we wanted to see done by a certain time. And if it wasn't done, then we would hold each other accountable for it. And they might even say to me, "Coach, you say you weren't going to run us as much.
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of tired. Can we change?" And you got to be able to meet them halfway, and you got to be able to realize that they're not just saying that to get out of something.
Right.
They're not trying to get out of running, or they may want to run more. They may want to play more.
Right.
Kids like to play today. So you got to throw your teaching kind of into a let's play. But if you promise you're going to do that and you don't do it,
right,
as a coach, you got to be able to accept their criticism
sure.
of you.
Yeah.
The same as you got to be able to criticize them and they accept it.
Yeah.
Probably in college, the biggest problem across the board is playing time.
Yeah.
I think that causes more issues, even for leadership, because sometimes those kids that aren't playing as much, they're going to the captain. And now the captain's got to take a deep breath and say, well, you're not playing as much because you're horrible. They don't want to say that. You just got to learn. And I don't mean that in a, you know what I mean? They don't want to ever come close to saying that.
Yeah.
And nobody does.
Yep.
But, so that's not how it really needs to be done.
Yep.
But, you know, you got to be able to give them an honest answer. You can't just say, oh, I don't know, he just doesn't like it. That's why he's not playing it, or she doesn't like it.
Yep.
And I think the other thing that's very, very important, and I learned this when I first started coaching. One of my best friends was a football coach. And he asked me to help him. And I said, I don't know much anything about football. He goes, well, you do want to coach, don't you? And this is, again, in the high school level, Atlantic City. He says, look, I need somebody who can help me break down film, who can help me with the recruiting, greet the college coaches when they come in on a game Saturday or when they come in during the week, and just to help you break, you're going to learn. And it was the best thing I ever did in my life, because football coaches have to rely on one another. There's just too many kids. You know, you have offense, you have defense, you got defensive backs. So you got to have a wide receiver coach. You got to have a defensive coach. Mm-hmm. And they also have to coach. They can't just stand there with their hands in their pocket and watch.
Right.
So I took that mentality into basketball. And I've had assistants come to me from other programs and say, I'm amazed at how much you want us to coach.
Yeah.
I go, well, number one, the school's not paying you to just stand there and look at me.
Right.
So if this is pick up your check and wait 6 weeks and then go spend it, you better leave now.
Yeah.
Because I actually had a defensive coordinator. If I wasn't going to do the defense, they were going to be the offensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. I had special game situations coach. So if there's a timeout and we're coming out of a timeout and it's, you know, our ball underneath the basket, my assistant coach is probably going to take that huddle.
Yep.
And the players respect that because now they know they're responsible to him or her.
Yep.
For that particular phase of the game.
And
so that to me is really key.
Right. And the kids know that prior to that huddle sit down of
absolutely
whatever. Coach Kelly is our end of game situations or our under the basket or whatever.
Yep. And they also have to know that if someone isn't given 100% of practice and they're called out on it, it's the same as me calling them out on it.
Sure.
So if that coach said, Coach, I think Mary ought to go home this afternoon. She's really not into it right now. Go ahead, send her home.
Yeah. Yep.
Or sit her down. Send her to the trainer, whatever. If the players know that that's going to actually happen and I'm not going to overrule them.
Yep.
It also helps with leadership because you got to have your assistants on board. Mm-hmm. You just can't have, if I ever was at a coaching clinic, I would say to the head coaches, you have to have your coaches engaged. You cannot just, because I have been around coaches that do it all. They do not want to delegate anything out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a miserable situation for those other coaches.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the same thing with players. You got to trickle that down. The players have to be able to feel confident to you and say, Coach, I know you want us to run this play this way, but if we skip this, we're going to get the same thing. And you look at it and you say, well, okay, let's try it. And it works. Mm-hmm. Now they've bought into something, and you know what? They're probably right.
Yep.
If it's my way or the highway in today's world, it doesn't work.
Right. It's usually the highway.
Yeah, it just doesn't work. And I think that's any phase. And again, that's a life lesson. Oh. You're not going to go to work and come in late and look at your boss and go, all right, whatever. It's not happening. Right. So you're not going to do it on the basketball court either.
Right.
But getting them to buy in and getting everybody to understand everyone's role, I think, is really important. That the whole team, not only do you have the individual meetings, you then sort of let everybody know that this is our goal, this is what we expect, and you can't expect too much you can't expect the same thing from every player.
Right.
Some can and some can't. So if someone can't, and then the person who can wants to call them out on it, you have to be able to rectify that real quick.
Sure.
So I guess it comes down to communication.
Yeah.
An open format with respect. You can't have anarchy either, which you've seen that on teams.
Well, that's what I was getting at of I love what you said there about creating ownership, right? And letting the team have some input as to maybe a strategy or maybe a tweak on a play or something like that. How do you assert yourself as the authority to say, I'm open to your input, but once we decide something, like I'm still the coach, you're still the players. Right?
Yeah, and there's times that has happened.
Yeah.
Where we used to get it a lot is, Coach, this team's killing us in man-to-man. We got to play zone.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll play zone. Now it gets worse.
Yep.
So you go back to man-to-man. Now, next day, you got something to hang your hat on and say, hey, look, remember when you called me out for playing man and we should have went zone? Look what happened.
Yeah.
You guys didn't even know the zone. You didn't know the slides.
Yeah.
So that, I think, they'll look at you and go, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Or if they're stubborn, they're not going to see it. And that's, again, where the leadership role comes in. And the other part of the team has to say, no, the coaches are right. We were doing okay in man-to-man.
Yeah.
So ownership it's a two-way street. It really is. You got to be able to, but the buck stops with the head coach. And I would even say that if I gave assistant coaches an opportunity to do something and it didn't go well, and you're being interviewed by someone and you just can't throw that coach under the bus.
No, right. That's on me.
I gave them that responsibility.
Yep.
Now, are we going to go talk about it probably in an empty room somewhere? Yes. Because that, again, is accountability.
Mm-hmm.
And I never wanted my coaches to be yes men or yes women. No, if you didn't like the way I was doing something, we need to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I also had a rule, never correct the coach in front of the team.
Yep. Let
them go. Let them make a mistake. Even if the players are going to, but, that kind of a deal.
Yep.
You can always come back and correct that.
Yep.
You don't need to make anybody, including players, look bad in that situation. It's always correctable.
Yep. Awesome. Wow, that was you're hitting home with me for a couple things, right? There's some things that are coming up, in our seasons, hopefully, that we get, and striking that balance is going to be a key component to it. For sure.
It's hard because the other balance you have to strike, which I don't want to be disrespectful to them, but on our level, it's not as bad. But the parent interference is becoming overbearing. I mean, a little bit of my background, I'm involved in Little League.
Yep.
And it's not getting worse. It's worse.
Yeah.
So you gotta be able to separate that. I mean, I've seen some unbelievable things go on in high school where parents will basically sit right across the bench so that at timeouts or whatnot, their daughter or son can look right at them.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen coaches tap the daughter on the shoulder and say, "Get up, next person in." Well, coach, why? Well, is that person across the hall, across the court your coach, or am I? And of course, she's going to go home and say something.
Yep.
And then you got to deal with it.
Yep.
And the worst part of all of it, and this is just my observation of 40-some years of being involved.
Yeah.
A lot of your school administrators back down and don't back coaches.
Yeah.
And that's not a good thing.
Right.
It's really not.
You run into trouble with that.
There's still good ones that will, say, "Hey, look, if you're coming to my office and you want to talk about coach, here's 2 rules. If it's playing time or game strategy, turn around and leave.
Yep.
If my coach is some way you think being disrespectful or not giving your son or daughter an opportunity, come on in."
Yep.
Too many of them now invite them in.
Yep.
And say, "Well, what?" And to me, that is, it's becoming epidemic.
Yeah.
And kids know that. They spread the word.
Yeah.
And the coach becomes out there on an island by themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, no, having a strong administration and knowing that they're going to have your back as long as just like you said, right? As long as you're being respectful to their kids and
exactly. And you're being fair.
Right.
And,
Yep.
And a lot of the times they do it not in your presence. So you don't know what the parent was saying. And then they want to call you in. And then it's hearsay evidence. It's just, and I think historically one of the problems, and I guess this is just because of the change in atmosphere of education, and not to go on that tangent because I know that's not really but it's all part of running a program. Historically, a lot of times administrators were athletes and they understand, and they'll be a little bit more. Now, sometimes they have no experience in even being on a team, or what comes in to be it, and it can get very bad for the coach because they're put in a bad position.
Yeah.
They're not being supported.
Yeah.
So you need that support all the way through.
Yeah.
And that's even at the college level. You got to have the support of your administration and the respect, and that's a two-way street.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. This has been awesome, Coach. I have 2 more questions for you.
Okay. I hope I don't take as long to answer them, but
no, this is wonderful. Thank you. And you touched on it a little bit before. If you were at a coaching clinic, right? But I'm curious, if you could go back and talk to yourself in your first year of coaching, or maybe your second year of coaching, and give yourself a piece of advice, what would you say?
My first year coaching, I probably would rather have started out kind of the way I ended up. I know that when I first started out, it was my way or the highway. some of that was because of where and who I coached.
Yep.
I coached in Atlantic City, and I coached girls to start out with, but I was also coaching football. And there wasn't a whole lot of parental support. They were inner city kids for the most part, and they were either being raised by grandparents or single family, and mom was out working. So it's not kind of an excuse, but they quickly respected you as a coach because they knew that you were in their corner, maybe for the first time in their life, that somebody actually was taking a special interest in, which was the sport.
Sure.
And sometime I might have been a little bit too hard on them. Where if it were, now it's also the change of the human being has changed too.
The last couple of years.
I could not talk to players the last 10 years the way I talked to my players the first 10 years. If I can put it in decades. You could coach those kids to death. Today, it's, well, why do we have to do this?
Yeah.
And you really have to adjust.
Yeah.
And I don't think early on I was going to adjust.
Yeah.
And no, some of the players that played for me back then, I mean, had a couple state championship games, and they'll look right at me and say, you know what, the way you did it was the best way. And I now have kids, and I know you can't do it today the way you could coach us. And in a way, it's a good thing, but in also a way, it's a shame. You just, the way you have to adjust yourself today in the game, coaching, you have to change. And not just the technology end of it, the emotional part of it. So I think that might be, the answer to that. My first 2 years, I know it was highway or my way.
Yeah.
And I had a couple hit the highway.
Yep.
And I had them come back, and they ended up being my best players.
Yeah.
They walked out in tears, and I'm not happy about that today. You couldn't do that.
Yep.
Today they wouldn't come back. They would be gone. Today would be doing something else.
Right. It sounds like you have grown, and I admire and respect your adaptability.
Well, I think in today's world, if coaches don't, they're not going to last.
Yeah.
They're going to do this 5 or 6 years, which is unfortunate, and they're going to get out. One of the things that I was a male coaching a female sport because of necessity. Females didn't want to coach back then. And there were a lot of reasons for it. Mm-hmm. And I think it's even a little true today. But I encourage all my ex-female players to some way, shape, or form stay in the game.
Yeah.
Coach AAU. There's more opportunities for you. Become a referee. Mm-hmm. Become some kind of a mentor. The sport needs you. Because I see today some pretty good coaches that were females. They leave in 2 or 3 years because they can't handle some of the things we just talked about. They don't want to confront parents. They don't want to confront all the different social issues that now get involved in coaching.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to understand, when you're a coach in today's world, there's probably a cell phone somewhere in one of the lockers.
Yep.
One of their gym bags.
Yep.
And they are copying and recording just about everything you said.
Yep. Yeah.
And it's funny because I never got into this. I just never saw an advantage to it, but they had I never got, kids don't respect bad language. And there's so many coaches, especially old school, that was a common occurrence. I mean, when I coached at Atlantic City, I had some really good boys teams, and I went and sat right behind some of the Division I college coaches. And I'm telling you, some of the stuff that comes out of their mouth, you just, I don't think you can't do that in high school.
Right.
And you shouldn't do it.
Right.
So having the respect is something that I think turns people off pretty quickly in coaching, and I hope it turns around, because these kids need good coaches, and they need good female coaches that have been through it. They've been in the game, and they know, because now there's a ton of girls that have played.
Yeah.
There's it's not a problem.
Yeah.
In fact, what I see now is, unfortunately, because I've done some research into this, when I was coaching maybe 10, 15 years ago, 15, 16 years old was the dividing line between, I'm going to keep playing, or I'm going to stop playing. Now it's like 11 and a half, 12 years old.
Yeah.
They make decisions. I'm done. I'm not playing anymore. And some of it's burnout.
Yep.
Some of it's parent driven.
Yep.
And other interests. So it's not an easy, in today's world, it's not an easy profession. There are a lot of things. You are probably one acquisition away of being accused of something that you can't defend in today's world. And I think it's a shame, because coaching can be fun, but it also has its frustration points.
Yeah, definitely. I lied to you. I have two more questions.
Okay.
So, and I'm curious, and you mentioned Amanda a couple times, and I'm sure she'll want you to reference something of hers, but if it's not hers, don't worry about it. If there's a particular game, or practice or growing point that stood out to you as either like a high or a low, and what did you learn from it that you could share with us?
You mean myself?
Yeah.
I think sometime when you when you coach, you can take some things for granted. Am I on the right track? You gotta really you gotta understand the whole person, and I think there's times where I may have only looked at the athletic side or the game side of something. And one thing that kids will always say, and I probably did this in my career, and I probably did it more than once. Player makes a mistake and you pull them out of the game. What I've really tried to do is grow patience and maybe let them make 6 mistakes or 5 mistakes, and you take them out of the game. Because I don't care if you let them have 5 mistakes anymore. They're going to say to you, I make 1 mistake and you're taking me out of the game. So, and I know there was a point in my career, I took you out of the game because you made 1 mistake. And I don't know still to this day if that was the better thing to do than to change a little bit and give them some rope to hang themselves.
Yep.
And I think Amanda probably is a perfect example of someone to speak to, because she probably played for me when I was a little bit. They've even said to me, Coach, you've really mellowed.
Yeah, she has.
And I've said, no, the players have mellowed. You can't coach today the way I coached you.
Yeah.
They're going to turn away from you. They're going to, but Amanda was a point guard, and I was ruthless with my point guards.
Yeah.
I wanted my point guards to be the definition of what a point guard is supposed to be. And that's, you're me out on the court.
Yep.
And I know that I probably threw more blame and more responsibility to them than I did anyone on the team.
Yeah.
And that sometimes you got to, and then I would let it go. I wouldn't maybe build them back up.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I learned over my years that you're going to knock them down. You got to also build them up.
Yeah.
In particular, if they're your point guard or leader, it's hard out there when you're trying to bring the ball down the court in a full court press and your teammates are running away from you.
Yep.
They're going the other way. They don't want any parts of the ball. Sometimes you would just chirp and jump out at the point guard.
Yeah.
And Amanda's an example because she was a point guard for me.
Yeah.
And she was also very, very tough, liked to play defense.
Yep.
And you knock her down, she's getting up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that line in there. You said if you're going to knock them down, you make sure you build them up, because
you have to.
That's what coaching is.
Yes.
It really is.
And as it's transitioned, through the years, that's become more important. Not that it never was important, but the sensitivity level today is very high.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, Coach, this has just been awesome. I really appreciate, and I just want to take a second to acknowledge and thank you for what you've done for the game in the last 40 years, right? And seeing it from you were inches away from it being a totally different game in the 6-player game.
Yep.
Through now and helping us, even now in your retiring years, with like breaking down film and giving us analysis and still sharing your wisdom. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you taking the time today to talk.
I appreciate you, Kelly, for asking me, because it kind of keeps me involved in some way and it keeps my interest.
Yeah.
You want to have something interesting. I know high school teams don't have a lot of free time. Get the I've done this occasionally, because even in college level, you don't have a lot of time.
Right.
But to have fun, if you need an icebreaker, get the rules.
Okay.
And have them put a skirt on and go out and play 6-man basketball.
Oh, gee.
They'll look at you, because that's how they played. They didn't have shorts. They wore skirts. Yep. Kind of like, I guess they do in field hockey, right, today?
Right. Yeah, in lacrosse, I think.
And lacrosse, yeah. That's how basketball was.
Get out.
And it was only a rover. And the rules are out there. You can get them, and they'll look at you like it's crazy. Then they get an appreciation for how the game has evolved.
Yeah.
To where now you're starting to see the higher level Division I teams play over the rim.
Yeah. I love that. Like, I'm sure the kids would love it too.
No, they would be in shock. What do you mean this is how they play?
Yeah.
In fact, now they're at the age where their mothers wouldn't remember it. There used to be a time when mom would say, "Well, that's how I played."
Yeah.
We couldn't. What do you mean you can't cross half court?
Right. Yeah. No, that's I like that a lot. Awesome. So, and kind of along that line, Coach, my final question is, if you have a resource or a book, a movie, video, something that you would recommend other coaches check out to help improve our craft as coaches.
That's a tough question. I don't right now have any one book, because I look at a lot of them, but I will tell you this, and this is maybe the old school in me, but any book written by Dean Smith, especially any of his instructional books, is very worthwhile having. He was a tremendous teacher of the game and a very, very good innovator of the game. Just a real quick story on him and why I like anything that he's written, whether it's his books or his articles. I was at a clinic where he spoke and he brought his whole staff. It was a kind of clinic where it was a breakout room. Mm-hmm. You could go listen to their different assistants. And my one assistant was a defensive guru, and he loved this thing called the point zone. Well, even today, people say, well, what's the point zone? Well, Dean Smith kind of used it all the time, and it's kind of like a boxing one. Now, this is not the age of video I'm talking about. This is 16 millimeter film. I'm coaching in Atlantic City, and he said to me, "What's your interest in the point zone?" Now, this is Dean Smith, and we're in a room, and he's talking to us. And we're sitting there with a beer. And he goes, "I'm amazed that you guys have interest in the point zone." He says, "I'll tell you what, I'm going to send you out about an hour reel of 16 millimeter film. Just promise me you'll send it back to me." Within 3 days, I had the special delivery at the high school.
Wow.
The real film on all the point zone.
My goodness.
I mean, there was no videotape then. It was either film or live. And that just impressed me to no end. And I started like really, I would if he was anywheres around close by. I think the biggest thing that I would recommend for coaches to do today is go to clinics. They're not as plentiful as they used to be.
Yeah.
And with what's going on now with crowds and, books and videotape. And right now there is so much good stuff on the internet that you could look up some of Dean Smith's stuff, and they're going to have it broken down on some kind of film and whatnot. So that would be my recommendation. Anything by him.
Awesome. We'll have to.
That's if you're looking at the X's and O's. I mean, today most coaches want to read about philosophy and it's switching how to handle problems, and so there's a whole different side of coaching now.
Right. Do you have any one of those that you like, that you know of?
No, not really. I kind of like to look at any ones that are dealing with leadership.
Sure.
And not necessarily by somebody that has dealt with Division I players. You like to listen to people that have like maybe coached at the high school level, and look, if you walk into a gym, whether it's a junior high coach or a college coach, you should walk out learning something.
I like that. Yeah.
There's just so many ideas out there that, you should really pay attention to what's going on, and you should really leave that you've learned something.
Yeah. No, you I love that. I think good coaches are always learning. And I think
yes, without a doubt.
Good leaders are always learning and trying new things and like failing forward, and I like that.
You can't be afraid to fail.
Yeah.
If not, if you're going to be afraid to try something, whether it's a 1-2-2 zone or a 2-2-1 zone, or if you don't try it, you're not going to learn anything from it.
Yeah.
The one thing you'll learn in coaching, everyone steals off of one another. Mm-hmm. It's just how you put it together and how you throw it into your philosophy that is going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. I've stolen just about everything so far. And
I think some of the biggest mistakes we've made as coaches is we look at a game and say, wow, that's a great play. I'm going to try that. Well, sometimes you got to look at who's running that great play. You have a Michael Jordan or LeBron James running the play, it's going to work.
Yeah.
You got to look at your 5 high school players and said, is this going to work?
Right. Right.
So, you got to work at it. It doesn't come easy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this was great, Coach. I can't thank you enough for taking the time and come on. Thank you.
Thank you. And, good luck this year. I hope there is a year.
Thank you.
Because I look forward to breaking down more film.
Awesome.
Getting your players mad at me.
They love it. They love it. Awesome.